Hey friends, welcome back to week 3 of our series Real, in which we are looking at the story of Jesus' life, of him interacting with his 3 friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, in order to ask the question, what can we learn from Jesus' friendships to apply to our own friendships in our everyday life? Now, to recap where we've been, the past couple weeks, we looked at how Jesus responded to Mary and Martha after their brother Lazarus had died. And we saw that Jesus responded to both Mary and Martha in ways that were very intentional to what they needed at that given moment. When Jesus talked with Martha, he found out that Martha kind of needed a reminder of who he was in order to give her a little bit of a hope and a picture of what could come. Whereas with Mary, Jesus showed his friendship by being compassionate with her. He listened to her, he walked with her, and he wept with her. And now this week, we're going to learn about one more aspect of friendship through Jesus' relationship with Lazarus. Now you may be wondering, how is Jesus going to have a relationship with Lazarus when Lazarus is actually in the tomb right now? And so today's story is actually going to be a wild one. And I look forward to talking to you about it more in just a bit. But first I want to ask you this question. Have you ever had a friend kind of try to warn you to either not do something, or they tell you you need to do something, but you decided, I'm just gonna ignore you. I'm just gonna do my own thing? I'll tell you, I have quite a bit. And if you've heard me talk at all in the last year, more than likely you've heard me talk about my dog, Smokey. Because I'm gonna tell you, I'm kind of obsessed with this dog. Smokey's a little 1-year-old pup, and since kind of day one that we've had her, Smokey has had what you could call a sock problem. Meaning, if Smokey sees a sock, Smokey's going to grab that sock, and Smokey's probably going to eat that sock. And so we had Smokey for about a month, one day after work, where Smokey comes proudly prancing into our living room where I'm sitting scrolling on my phone with a sock in her mouth. And Taylor, my wife, was in the other room and said, "Hey, Brett, can you grab that sock out of Smokey's mouth? I can't take care of it." And so I'm sitting here again on my phone, and I'm thinking, Smokey's going to be fine. What's the worst thing that could happen? And so 1 second later, I look up at Smokey. She's staring at me, sock in eye, and just as though she knows what I'm thinking, goes and swallows this entire sock whole in one bite. Now, I don't know if you know much about puppies, but I will tell you that a little puppy swallowing a sock whole is not a great thing to happen. And so about 4 hours later and a gigantic vet bill later, I learned that when Taylor tells me to do something, I probably should listen. Because Taylor has both mine and my dog Smokey's best interests at heart. See, it's important for us when we think about friendships, like, what are we calling people to do? Are we calling people to be better? Or are we calling people to just live the way they are? For the past couple weeks, we've mentioned the fact that one of the challenging parts about relationships or friendships is that they're made up of people. And every single one of us are sinful, broken people. We have messy lives. We have brokenness in our relationships. We have problems that we bring into our relationships that just make things complicated. But what we're going to see today in the story of Lazarus is that real friends draw the good out of one another. If you have your Bible or your phone with the Bible app with you, I invite you to join me in John chapter 11 as we continue reading this week's passage. Now, at this point in the story, Jesus has finally gotten to the tomb of Lazarus, and we're going to see what happens when he gets there. So in verse 38, we read this. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb, and it was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," Jesus said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been in there for 4 days." Now, a few years ago, there was a mouse that had died in the vents surrounding the office where I work. And for that entire week, nobody could find where on earth this mouse was. But as soon as you opened the door and walked into the office, you were just kind of like hit with this wall of stench. And this is like pre-COVID time, so people weren't used to like working at home, not a normal thing. But almost everybody in the office, as soon as they walked in, there was like, "Nope, sorry, I'm getting out of here because this is just disgusting." And all that was just from a tiny little mouse. In this story, Martha is warning Jesus, saying, "Jesus, There is a reason why that stone is over the tomb. You do not want to do this. Not a good idea. But even though Martha says this, Jesus looks at her and responds and brings back what he said a little bit earlier. Martha, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So the people, they took away the stone. And I imagine the people, as they're taking away this stone, they're kind of like waiting for this I told you so moment to Jesus. Like Jesus' big mistake. But they listened. And we see that as soon as they opened the stone, Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Lazarus, this guy who had been dead for 4 days, comes strolling out of the tomb. I mean, this is an absolute miracle. With just a few words, Jesus speaks new life into this lifeless body of Lazarus, and he walks out of the tomb. Now, before looking at sort of what we learn about friendship in this passage, I want us to notice something important about the larger story that John is telling here in this passage. See, when John recorded this event in Jesus' life, his purpose wasn't just to teach us about friendship. Instead, John was trying to teach us more about who Jesus was and the power that Jesus has. He wanted people to know that, hey, Jesus is God, and there is nothing in life, no problem is too big for the power of Jesus to speak into and to bring new life there. There is nothing in your relationship with your friends, no drama in your friendships, that Jesus can't bring new life into that. If Jesus can call a man out of the tomb, he can breathe new life into your life and into your relationships and your friendships as well. Now, I want you to hold on to that truth as we move on to what comes next. You see, after Lazarus walks out of the tomb, Jesus says this. He says, take off the grave clothes and let him go. You see what Lazarus is wearing? Get those off of him. Put new clothes on him. And why does Jesus say this? Well, because Lazarus isn't dead anymore. You don't need to look like a dead person, to dress like a dead person, to act like a dead person, because Lazarus, you're not dead anymore. You are alive. Jesus sees something that is old, and he calls him to something new. Jesus is drawing the good out of Lazarus and calling him into a new life. See, we learn through this passage about friendship that a real friend sees you, loves you, and accepts you, but also a real friend encourages you to become the person who you were created to be. Now, I think for a lot of us, when we're looking for friends or thinking about friendship, we're looking for people in our lives who we can hang out with, maybe who have the same passions as us, who we can like hang out and just have a good time with. And there's nothing wrong with that. I hope you find people that you like to hang out with, and I hope you're that type of friend as well. But friendship is also a little bit deeper than that. If you really care about somebody, you accept them, but you don't just accept them. You want them to become the people that they were created to become their full selves, and so that other people can experience the best parts of them as well. But as we've already mentioned, the tricky part about this is that every single one of us has broken, messy parts in our lives. Whether it is sin, or it is brokenness, or unhealthy relationships from the past, we might have negative thought patterns, whatever it may be, we are all walking around with a little bit of grave clothes on in our lives. But you see, just as Jesus spoke new life into Lazarus, Jesus can speak new life into those parts of your life, into those parts of your friends' lives as well. Jesus has the power to make us new. We don't need to walk around in grave clothes any longer. So you see, a real friend looks at our friends in the way that Jesus sees them and says, hey, you don't need to walk around with those clothes anymore, because Jesus wants to make you alive. Because a real friend draws the good out of one another. So as we head into life groups, I'd like you to consider a few questions to help you think about this for your own friendships. And the first is this: how often do you try and draw the good out of your friends? Are your friendships mostly for fun? And if so, how could you try to take your friendships just a little bit deeper? Second question is this: how would your friendships look different if you or your friends prioritize each other's flourishing? What impact would it have on your life or your friends' lives if you actually tried to help one another become better? What are the benefits of this? But also, what are the challenges to doing that? What might keep you from maybe speaking up or calling something out in your friend's life? And then finally, how can you find real friends who will draw the good out of you? Think about who's in your life right now. Are those people who are challenging you to be better? If not, what changes can you make to help them be friendships that help you move forward, move towards Jesus? You see, real friendship isn't about being perfect or surrounding ourselves with perfect people. But real friendships should keep us moving forward together to become more like Jesus.